A poor teenager stood trembling in court, 17 years old, no lawyer, no hope. But in the next 60 seconds, he said something that silenced the entire courtroom and made headlines across the country. He wasn't supposed to win, just 17, dirt on his shoes, hands shaking. He faced powerful men in suits and a furious judge, but when he opened his mouth, the room froze. Elijah Brooks wasn't born with a silver spoon. He wasn't even born near one. At just 17, he lived with his single mother in a rusting trailer on the forgotten edge of rural Alabama. The roads were cracked. The sky always looked tired, and the only thing colder than the winters was the silence in their tiny kitchen. His father left when Elijah was 6. No goodbye, no note, just one morning, an empty truck space, and a breakfast chair that stayed untouched for years. Since then, it was just Elijah and his mom. 2 souls. Trying to survive on scraps and stubborn hope, she worked double shifts at the diner, never complained, just came home smelling like coffee and grease. Elijah? After school, he mowed lawns, hauled junk, fixed radios, rewired toasters, anything for a few bucks. But behind his quiet eyes was a rare kind of brilliance. He wasn't just good at math, he lived it. Equations were his escape. He'd fix broken electronics not by guessing, but by understanding how electricity thinks. He didn't brag, he didn't post about it, but when his classmates scrolled TikTok, Elijah was teaching himself to code on a cracked phone screen with borrowed Wi-Fi 1 icy morning. He saw a second grader crying without gloves. Elijah took off his own, threadbare, the only pair he had, and slipped them on the kid's hands, said nothing, just smiled, even as his fingers went numb. His teachers noticed. A few offered help, an extra textbook, a ride home. But in a town like his, goodwill had limits, no internet, no money, and no last name anyone cared about. Still, Elijah dreamed, loudly in silence. He wanted to build bridges, systems, machines. He wanted MIT, not just for himself, but to prove that someone from nowhere could make it somewhere. Every night, after dishes and job shifts, he'd pull out second-hand textbooks, scribble algorithms on old diner receipts, and read engineering blogs offline, page by saved page. He knew the odds, poor, unknown, no connections, but he also knew one thing: numbers don't lie. What Elijah didn't know was that soon, because of a single unexpected act, he'd find himself standing in a courtroom, not as a defendant, not as a witness, but as a voice that would silence the entire room. One chilly morning, Elijah's world changed, without warning. He was walking home after a long day of work, his hands still smelling faintly of motor oil and grass clippings. He didn't see the black SUV roll up to the curb, didn't hear the heavy footsteps behind him until a rough hand grabbed his arm. "Come with us," a gruff voice said. Confused, Elijah asked, "What did I do?" But no one answered. He was hauled to the police station like a criminal, handcuffed and thrown into a small, cold jail cell, too tight for a 17-year-old dreaming big. The accusation? Stealing. A rare antique watch worth thousands had vanished from the local pawn shop, a place owned by one of the wealthiest and most influential men in town. The problem: there was no evidence, no fingerprints, no witnesses, no video footage, only Elijah. Poor, quiet, with no powerful friends to vouch for him, but in a town where money and reputation spoke louder than truth, suspicion was enough. Elijah was arrested, and the news spread like wildfire. The whispers started the next day. Trailer trash kids stole from Mr. Langford. Guess even the poor can't keep their hands clean. At school, Elijah felt eyes burning into his back, whispers slicing through the hallways. He was a target now. The local newspaper ran headlines calling him a thief, painting him as a desperate boy trying to claw his way out by stealing the riches, treasures. His public defender, a tired woman named Ms. Crawford, barely looked at him. She carried a stack of paperwork, but never offered a single word of encouragement or hope. Elijah tried to explain, but she shook her head. "I have too many. All cases, we'll talk later." They never talked again. In that cold cell, Elijah's mind raced, not with fear, but with frustration. How could this be happening? "I didn't take anything," he thought. The walls seemed to close in on him, the silence deafening. He could almost hear the ticking of that missing watch, each second mocking him. Back home, his mother didn't sleep. Every night, she knelt by their small kitchen table, hands clasped tightly, whispering prayers. "I know you didn't do it, baby," she said through tears. Her voice cracked, but her faith in him never wavered. She was his anchor in a storm that threatened to drown him. Yet despite her hope, the weight of the town's judgment was crushing. Neighbors who once smiled now avoided them. Jobs stopped calling. The library card, the only key to Elijah's self-taught world, was almost taken away. He was losing everything, and still Elijah refused to break, because deep down, he knew the truth would come out. He just had to find a way to make the whole courtroom, his entire town, listen. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and nervous tension. Elijah Brooks walked in, his heart pounding louder than the clicking of the judge's gavel. He was just 17, but the oversized suit he wore made him look even smaller, like a boy trying to fit into a world made for adults. His hands trembled slightly as he took his seat. Around him, the courtroom buzzed with whispers. The townspeople had come to watch the trailer trash kid face his fate. At the front stood the pawn shop owner's lawyer, a sharply dressed man with a smug smile that never quite reached his cold eyes. He paced confidently, his expensive shoes clicking on the wooden floor, ready to tear Elijah apart with words sharper than any blade. Elijah's eyes flicked to the judge, a middle-aged woman who seemed more interested in her paperwork than the boy before her. She barely glanced up as the charges were read aloud, her voice monotone. "The defendant is charged with theft of property, specifically a rare antique watch belonging to Mr. Langford." Elijah swallowed hard. The room was heavy with skepticism. No one believed his innocence, not the lawyer, not the judge, and certainly not the murmuring crowd. When the judge finished, Elijah's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Your Honor, may I say something?" A ripple of laughter echoed through the courtroom. The pawnshop lawyer smirked, leaning forward, clearly amused. "Let the kid speak," he sneered, as if waiting for a sob story or a confession. Elijah's mother, sitting in the back, clutched, her hands so tightly her knuckles turned white. But Elijah didn't cry. He didn't apologize. He looked straight at the judge, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "I didn't steal that watch." The room fell silent. The judge raised an eyebrow. The lawyer scoffed, preparing to cut him down. But Elijah wasn't finished. He continued, "I don't have money. I don't have connections. But I have a brain, and I want to prove I'm not a thief." In that moment, something shifted. The sneers softened, the whispers quieted. The courtroom wasn't just a place for accusations anymore. It was now Elijah's stage, and he was ready to perform. The courtroom was still buzzing with disbelief when Elijah cleared his throat. Calm and steady, he asked the judge, "May I use the projector to show something?" A hush fell over the room, curiosity mixing with skepticism. The judge nodded, intrigued despite herself. From his pocket, Elijah pulled out a small, worn notebook, the kind you might mistake for a school diary. But this was no ordinary notebook. "This," Elijah said, holding it up, "is where I write everything, every detail, every thought, every clue." He flipped it open to reveal pages filled with neat calculations, timestamps, sketches, and notes that looked like the work of a young detective. He continued, "I solved this case myself." A wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom. How could A 17-year-old have done what the police and lawyers couldn't? Elijah approached the projector and connected his notebook's contents to the screen. First came the security footage timeline, timestamps meticulously noted. "Look here," Elijah pointed. At 3:15 p.m., the camera shows a shadow moving inside the pawn shop, but notice, the shadow's shape doesn't match mine. He paused, letting the courtroom take it in. It's taller, broader. Gasps echoed quietly from the spectators. He clicked to the next slide, a photo of the pawn shop's heavy front door. "Now, listen carefully." Elijah's voice grew firmer. The door's lock was broken days before the alleged theft. The shop owner was the only one with a key that could open it properly. He looked directly at the lawyer across the room. Without that key, it would have been impossible to get inside. The lawyer's confident smirk faltered, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Elijah wasn't done yet. He explained how the security cameras had a blind spot where the shadow appeared, a gap no one had noticed before. And, Elijah added, softly, the pawn shop owner was the last person seen entering the shop that day, right before the watch went missing. Whispers turned to stunned silence. The judge leaned forward, eyes sharp, suddenly paying full attention. The courtroom was no longer just a place of accusation. It had become a stage for truth. Elijah's quiet determination filled the room. He didn't just defend himself, he dismantled the case piece by piece, using nothing but logic, observation, and his brilliant mind. The opposing lawyer shuffled papers nervously, but the damage was done. The townspeople exchanged looks, some nodding in disbelief, others shaking their heads in astonishment. All eyes were on Elijah, the boy who refused to be silenced. And in that moment, something clear and powerful echoed silently throughout the courtroom. Sometimes it isn't money or power that wins the day. Sometimes it's just one brave mind and a little bit of courage. Just when the courtroom began to settle into uneasy silence, Elijah reached into another pocket and pulled out a thin stack of worn papers. "These," he said, voice steady but charged with quiet urgency, "are old court records." The room stirred, curiosity turning into surprise. Elijah stepped closer to the judge's bench, placing the papers carefully on the table. With a deep breath, he continued, "I found these hidden away in the public archives. Most people don't look past the surface." He glanced at the opposing lawyer, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "These records show that the pawn shop owner has a history," he let the words hang for a moment before finishing, "of framing innocent teens for theft." A sharp murmur rippled through the courtroom. Elijah's eyes scanned the room, then he said, "And here's the strangest part." He pointed to a highlighted section in the documents. "This same watch, yes, the very one they say I stole, was reported stolen before." A stunned silence fell like a thick fog. The judge's gavel slammed down, breaking the silence with a sharp bang. "Order! This court will take a recess immediately." The judge's voice was firm. No room for argument. Everyone in the courtroom froze. The public defender looked as if he had just seen a ghost, his mouth slightly open, eyes wide with disbelief. Elijah remained standing, alone in the center, wiping sweat from his forehead. His heart pounded, but his face betrayed no fear, only determination. Around him, faces were a mix of shock, confusion, and reluctant respect. The opposing lawyer whispered something urgently to his client, the pawn shop owner, but Elijah's words had already done their damage. The courtroom was no longer just a place for accusations. It had become a battlefield for truth. Outside the courtroom, whispers started to spread, word that the boy from the trailer park might just have uncovered something bigger than anyone imagined. But inside, Elijah stood quietly, knowing the fight was far from over. His mother's tearful voice echoed in his mind, "I know you didn't do it, baby." And in that moment, Elijah understood that this was more than a fight to clear his name. It was a fight for justice. The courtroom was packed, every seat taken, whispers fading into an expectant hush. The judge returned to his bench, face stern, but attentive. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at the evidence laid out before him. Elijah stood tall, no longer the scared boy in oversized clothes, but a young man armed with truth and courage. He began to explain, calmly and clearly, every detail he had uncovered: the flawed security footage, the mechanical failure in the pawnshop door, and the hidden history of deceit. The courtroom hung on every word. Even the pawnshop owner shifted uneasily in his chair, his confident smirk fading. When Elijah finished, the room was silent, a silence so heavy it felt like time itself had stopped. The judge leaned forward, then spoke, his voice steady, filled with unexpected respect. "Young man, you have done what many experienced attorneys in this room could not." A murmur of agreement rippled through the courtroom. Suddenly, police officers stepped forward. They approached the pawnshop owner, reading him his rights. The man's face drained of color as he was handcuffed, escorted out, his empire of lies unraveling in real time. The owner's lawyer tried to leave, but the judge called out, "Not so fast." He motioned for the lawyer to stay, his tone firm. "This case is far from over." Then the courtroom erupted, not in chaos, but in applause. Slowly at first, then louder until everyone was on their feet. A standing ovation for the boy who had faced impossible odds and won. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed as they shouted questions, desperate to capture the story of the poor teen who outsmarted the system. Elijah's mother rushed to his side, wrapping him in a tight embrace. Tears streaming down her face, she whispered, "I told you, baby. I knew you could." Elijah looked out at the crowd, his heart pounding with pride, hope, and the knowledge that his life had just changed forever. The story spread like wildfire. Local news aired Elijah Brooks' incredible journey, the teen who outsmarted the legal system. That clip went viral on social media, reaching thousands within hours. People shared it, talked about it, and celebrated Elijah's courage and brilliance. From a quiet trailer park in rural Alabama to the spotlight of national headlines, this was more than a story about justice. It was a story about hope. Weeks passed, the buzz settled, but Elijah's life was about to change forever. One afternoon, he received a simple white envelope in the mail. Inside was a letter from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It read, "We are honored to offer you a full scholarship to join our engineering program." Elijah's hands trembled as he read those words. He called his mother over immediately. She hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face, a proud smile lighting up her eyes. Softly, she whispered, "I told you, you're not just smart, you're unstoppable." Elijah held his mother close and looked out at the setting sun, casting a golden glow over their little trailer park. The same old streets, the same worn-down trailer. But now, his dreams were closer than ever. This wasn't just a victory in court, it was a new beginning, a powerful reminder that no matter how tough the odds, courage, intelligence, and hard work can break down any barrier. Today, Elijah Brooks is no longer just the kid from that dusty trailer park in Alabama. He's the founder of a non-profit organization dedicated to teaching law basics to kids who, like him, never had a voice in the courtroom. His mission is simple but powerful. No one should ever lose a fight just because they can't afford to speak up. Elijah travels from town to town, standing in front of classrooms full of underprivileged children. He teaches them how to understand their rights, how to stand firm, and how to use knowledge as their greatest weapon. His story continues to inspire, not just in small-town America, but wherever people face injustice. On the wall of his office hangs a framed photo from that unforgettable day in court, right beside the newspaper headline that reads, "Teen Genius Turns Courtroom Upside Down." Elijah's journey proves one thing: When courage meets knowledge, no obstacle is too big, no voice too small. And for the countless kids who now learn from him, Elijah Brooks is living proof that sometimes a single spark can light up the darkest room.